House of the Dragon, man. Every week, this show manages to leave me jaw-dropped. And this might be the best episode yet. Welcome back, Targaryen fans, and thank you once more for joining me on my spoiler review for House of the Dragon, Episode 4. Every single week, we are discussing all the spoilers for characters, story, and connections to the wider Game of Thrones universe right here as the episodes drop on HBO Max, so make sure you watch the episode before this video. But once you do, I need you guys to start the conversation in the comments below, because this is a doozy of an episode with drastic, dynamic shifts to the entire plot and all interpersonal relationships revolving the characters. It almost feels like a midpoint. The stakes are raised, the pressure is at an all-time high. It is, after everything that happens here with Rhaenyra and Daemon, Viserys and Alicent, things are about to go from bad to worse for all of these characters, and it's fascinating because they managed to tell such a big story with such drastic consequences that affect all these characters and the narrative so much, and yet it's a really small story. It happens in really the span of 24, maybe 48 hours, and that's really it. There are not too many locations, there are not too many characters from the wider scope of the series actively participating and driving the narrative. It's all very personal, very intimate with just this family and all the complications with all these mended relationships that need to be fixed or are about to be broken even more. And I was glued to the screen for this entire hour. As much as I love the action in the last episode, as much as the premiere sets everything up beautifully, this is really my favorite episode with all the character dynamics, as this show continues to be unpredictable in making all these characters give us a moment where we start to dislike them, but immediately also gives us something to make them so human, to make them so compelling and three-dimensional, painting all these characters in these moral shades of gray. But before we jump ahead 2 years like this episode did, I need you to start the conversation on this episode in the comments below. What you loved about this episode, what you didn't love, favorite moment and character, anything and everything down there. And if you're enjoying this review, if you enjoy these weekly House of the Dragon reviews, and if you love movies and TV, this is the place to be. So consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversation on your favorite movies and TV. And this being a Rhaenyra and Daemon centric episode, it is a brilliant move to begin with Rhaenyra on her suitor consideration tour, where it immediately and effectively illustrates how her choices have a large scale impact on the kingdom, causing a fight and even a death in front of her eyes while under the protection of Sir Christian. Furthermore, on her way back to King's Landing, when she begins to glow, her eyes perk up once she hears a dragon. This is Daemon on his way back home, where the dragon impacts the boat with a gust of wind and knocks her down. This is a perfect illustration of everything that is about to happen in this episode, where Rhaenyra, despite her love and admiration for her uncle, despite how close the two are, despite how twisted but somewhat genuine his love is for her, how they cannot help but hurt each other. And if that is not the Targaryen way, I don't know what is. It's a brilliant start for the episode, and it's a brilliant encapsulation of every single moment that is to follow and its impact on the story at large. And Daemon Targaryen continues to be one of the most fascinatingly written characters in all of television for me, with layers and nuance and complexity. The way he returns to King's Landing as the King of the Narrow Sea, offering his spoils and claims of victory to his brother, kneeling before him only to etch ever closer to his niece so he can offer her the freedom he so covets himself, while manipulating and maneuvering his way closer to her, knowing her admiration for him, bringing us that fascinating scene where Rhaenyra and Daemon discuss the dynamics of marriage and power, where he's just presenting her a whole perspective that she doesn't recognize, that she doesn't get access to because she's a woman, and he knows that. This scene is so brilliantly laid out, and it conveys beautifully the relationship and dynamic between the two and how Daemon knows exactly what he is doing. And this is one of the two key scenes that convey the main themes of this episode, being manipulation and perception versus reality. The other one is perhaps my favorite sequence in the entire episode, where Rhaenyra finds a letter with a hidden map and uses the secret passageways in the Red Keep that we saw Tyrion use to escape after killing his father in the toilet on Game of Thrones, meeting with Daemon, who takes her out to town to witness what the people, their subjects, think about the Targaryens and the choices they've been making throughout the show thus far. Where last week we saw Viserys confronting himself with his choices, now we see Rhaenyra witnessing what the people think of her own family and her position as the heir to the Iron Throne. And this is all brilliant manipulation by Daemon, who is exploiting Rhaenyra's insecurities, hurt ego, and pride, only to bring the two closer as he lures her into a pleasure house, and the Targaryen in both of them truly comes out, and they do the nasty rather quick until Daemon negates her urges and desires, negates her advances, leaving her wanting more. These mind games Daemon brilliantly plays with Rhaenyra give her just a taste of the power and freedom she so desperately covets, validating her urges and wishes. This exploitation of her character flaws is brilliant characterization for both. But that is the Targaryen way. It's what makes them such fascinatingly compelling characters to watch as their stories unravel. Only for Rhaenyra to bed with Sir Criston Cole, someone she trusts and someone who deeply, genuinely cares for her without any second or evil intentions. This entire sequence, this entire relationship continues to be so twisted, but so engaging and so compelling as part of this story of the Targaryens. It's so well handled, and it's handled with nuance. It's illustrating a character flaw of Rhaenyra and showing us Daemon's true colors, and I was jaw-dropped as this all unfolded, knowing how much the show has established stakes and consequences, and I could only imagine what would come next. And I do want to talk about Viserys, and most importantly Alicent, who is one of the MVPs in this episode, but a nice transition between Daemon and Rhaenyra and the King and Queen is the Hand of the King himself, Otto Hightower, played by Rhys Ifans, who I've not talked about a lot in these reviews, but he's absolutely wonderful, self-serving, but with a compelling reason for it. And we find out he has spies in the city, much like Varys himself did in Game of Thrones, and he tells the king about Rhaenyra in the pleasure house with Daemon, an accusation that he cannot prove because he cannot tell the king about his spies. Alicent hears this, and it brings on some drastic consequences where by the end of the episode, Otto is stripped of his position as the Hand of the King. All his self-serviceness throughout the first 3 episodes have finally come back to bite him in the ass. Where in this episode, he was genuinely worried for the king. He was telling the truth. We know this, and yet he paid a heavy price for it. It's these choices, it's these consequences and stakes that make this show so compelling to watch. I'm just glad they didn't kill Rhys Ifans because he's just wonderful. I hope he's on this show for the longest time. But that moment when we have the king confronting his most trusted advisor of manipulating him and lying just so his own grandson could take the throne, of how he manipulated his daughter into the bed of the king himself, Brilliant storytelling. I say this every episode, but it's true. And that brings us into discussing the queen herself, Alicent Hightower, played by Emilia Carey, so beautifully and tenderly throughout this episode, where in that first moment, once Daemon comes back, we clearly see this is now a loveless marriage between her and Viserys. That loveless marriage, that friction, that strained relationship is so clear from the beginning, but a moment I loved was when Rhaenyra defends Alicent and her suggestion of seeing the tapestries, much like Alicent defended Rhaenyra and her choices and her claim last week. This is clearly a fractured friendship, but care and love are still there between the two, and this episode puts that to the test tremendously, as will clearly the rest of the season. Alicent is the character that best understands Rhaenyra, despite the princess believing that is her uncle, and a rift in this friendship is clearly present. There's still something there, as Rhaenyra does not wish the same fate for herself that befell Alicent now with this loveless marriage where she has no power and she basically lacks an identity besides wife of her husband. Compelling storytelling like this, when you balance the power struggles of two characters and the trust between two characters, is engaging to watch. And Alicent is the first to reach out and confront Rhaenyra about the accusations by her father, and it's honestly a scene that really hurts to watch. You feel tremendously for Alicent in this moment, as the effort of trying to find Rhaenyra a suitable husband was also on her part. She's been trying to help her friend tremendously, only to see those efforts and that friendship and care completely disregarded. Of course, Rhaenyra negates the accusations, but that only costs Alicent's father his position, which is once more a big fracture in this relationship, and there's basically a ticking clock on it all to crumble down. And despite the loveless marriage between the two, where Viserys ignorantly mocks his wife in front of everyone only to show kindness to her while they are alone, an extremely awkward sex scene between the two, it's nice to see the two kind of work together as the queen confronts the princess and the king confronts his own brother in an incredible scene where Daemon's plan all comes to light. And what is so great about this scene, besides revealing so much about the Targaryen brothers' dynamic and their youth, is that it proves Daemon's claims about Viserys right, that he is weak, unsure, and uncertain about making harsh decisions for himself, the family, the kingdom, and these are all choices that make sense for these characters. These conflicts, this drama that ensues, all feels earned and is rich with dramatic and emotional potential. All of this was Daemon strengthening his own claim to the throne by bringing back the ways and customs of old Valyria that he so cherishes and values, and now Viserys doesn't have a good option left. He is forced into a choice that he didn't want to make throughout this episode, when his small council suggests that he must make a marriage between the two Valyrian families of Targaryen and Velaryon. After Corlys Velaryon, he doesn't return. He wants to align himself with the Sea Lord of Braavos and have the strength of the free cities that pose a danger, enormous one, to the crown itself. And so Daemon leaves Viserys with no good choice, where the king's attempts at allowing Rhaenyra to choose a suitor for herself have failed for 2 years, and so she must now make the sacrifice for the family and marry into House Velaryon with Sir Rhaenyra and unite the two strongest Valyrian houses. Choices, consequences, and in Rhaenyra's ultimate search and pursuit of power, she is left ultimately powerless, where her dad even sends a tea so that no dangerous baby consequences may come from her entanglement with Daemon. This is such a brilliant episode. The way House of the Dragon effortlessly manages week to week to tell a compelling character-driven story where every setup, every choice has a payoff, has a consequence, where every small story thread feeds into the next, continues to accumulate, giving this narrative a constant sense of escalation, where nothing feels cheap, nothing feels cheated. It doesn't feel like they mold the narrative in their favor and contrive their way into a certain payoff. It all feels earned. It all feels like it seamlessly flows into its natural conclusion. And all of these moments, all of these characters, I find so fascinating and so engaging to watch. So far, 4 for 4. This is easily becoming one of the most impressive first seasons of television I have ever seen. This is first season of Game of Thrones good. This is Heroes Season 1 levels of good. The performances, the visuals, the writing, it's all top notch. And I can't help but be impressed every single week. But that's only my review of episode 4 of House of the Dragon. What did you think of this episode? How do you rank the episodes of the show thus far? Anything and everything down there. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for joining me week to week if you are doing so. And thank you to my channel members for always supporting this channel. I'll be back very soon, and until the next one, love each other and love the movies.